Japan, 1945. One bomb demonstrates the awesome power of nuclear fission. That same power is now being harnessed for peaceful purposes, but always remains potentially dangerous. 1979. An accident at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania sends thousands fleeing. 1986. An explosion and full meltdown at Chernobyl in Ukraine causes panic across Europe. Nuclear plants worldwide were supposed to be getting safer. But in 2011, the Fukushima nuclear facility is first rocked by an earthquake. Then, a massive tsunami. Japan is about to enter another radiation nightmare, while the world is reminded of its double-edged pact with the atom. Disasters don't just happen. They're triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down those final seconds from disaster. Northern Japan, March the 11th, 2011. Kindergarten teacher Eriko Horiyuchi is in class. The room begins to shake.
The tremors were enormous and went on for ages. Stuff had been thrown all over the room. I really thought the building might cave in on me.
She has to act quickly, but calmly.
I ducked under the desk along with the children and just monitored the situation.
The earthquake continues for 5 minutes. It's felt 230 kilometers away in Tokyo. Eriko's actions ensure the children are safe.
The kids had all done the disaster drills, and they did what the teachers told them to do, and so it all went to plan on the day.
Skyscrapers shake, and buildings collapse. The Japanese Meteorological Agency measures the quake at magnitude 9.0. It's the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan. Even though the epicenter is 130 kilometers out to sea, the first news pictures show widespread devastation throughout the north of the country. In central Tokyo, communications expert Kenichi Shimomura hurries to the Prime Minister's underground crisis center. The quake is so big, it's clear there's going to be a serious humanitarian disaster. The government hastily convenes an emergency meeting.
Because of the enormity of the disaster, my instinct was that the central government had to take its own initiative to act, rather than waiting for local governments.
5 of Japan's nuclear plants are in the disaster zone. Fukushima is the largest, providing enough energy to power every home in Tokyo. The Prime Minister's team has no direct link to the power plants. All information from the plant operator, TEPCO, filters through the government's nuclear regulator, run by Yoshinori Moriyama.
Right after the earthquake, we received news from the Fukushima nuclear plant that mains power was lost.
Fukushima is just 178 kilometers from the epicenter of the earthquake. At the first sign of tremors, the plant goes into scram mode. A controlled shutdown is underway. The power station appears to have suffered only minor damage. But the earthquake has destroyed key power lines which feed the plant. Emergency power sources kick in, so the plant can continue to shut down safely. (2:55 p.m.)
A
tsunami warning is broadcast to the nation. All of the northern Pacific Ocean is now on alert, including the Fukushima power station. At Teacher Eriko's school, all the pupils have survived the earthquake unscathed. Emergency plans call for everyone to evacuate. She packs the children into buses to take them down the hill from the school to their homes on the coast. She has not heard the tsunami warning. At Fukushima, the workers are also evacuated. A core team, the Fukushima 50, remain behind to ride out the tsunami. All along the Japanese coast, live news cameras relay images of the tsunami racing towards land. The Fukushima power station bears the full force of the tsunami. The site begins to flood. Almost all power is lost. Two workers assessing damage in the basements are killed instantly. Control rooms plunge into darkness. The Fukushima 50 can't monitor pressure or temperature. Worse, the cooling systems have failed. Teacher Eriko is worried. She may have sent the children to their deaths.
The bus route was along the coastline, so I was worried sick that it might have been washed away by the tsunami.
The Tokyo Crisis Center. Prime Minister Naoto Kan arrives to learn that the Fukushima plant has lost all power. Nuclear experts are drafted in to brief the Prime Minister.
Even those experts couldn't decide what should be done because this was totally beyond what they could have predicted.
Plant managers are desperate to cool their nuclear reactors. They need power.
We needed to deploy mobile generators. That was our last resort.
Roads around the power station are severely damaged. Transporting the generators is almost impossible. In the damaged control room of reactor number 1, Engineers are trying to find out what's happening inside the reactor. They resort to using battery packs and car batteries to power up instruments to take key readings. The radiation levels are beginning to rise. The Fukushima 50 don radiation suits and respirators to protect themselves. Their instruments reveal that pressure is rising inside the reactor. They must find a way to bring the pressure down. The news is relayed to the Prime Minister. He declares an official state of nuclear emergency.
I heard the PM repeatedly say, almost to himself, "This is really serious."
Decisive action is needed, but there is very little information to work from. They have no real-time readings and no direct communications with managers at the power plant. Even so, scientific advisors believe they have a solution to avoid the buildup of pressure inside the reactors.
Pressure inside the containment vessel must be kept low at all times. To release pressure, there's a valve. If you open it, pressure can be released outside.
The Prime Minister's advisors recommend the valves are opened to release steam. At the plant, senior managers oppose the plan. They fear if steam is vented, radioactive materials could escape into the atmosphere. But under orders, the Fukushima 50 try to locate the safety valves. With only torches to guide them, finding the valves is no easy task. And handheld Geiger counters reveal radiation levels are rising. It might be because the reactor itself cracked during the earthquake. The Prime Minister receives more bad news. Mobile generators have made it to the plant, but that's not enough.
The tsunami had thrown debris all over the site, so the mobile generators had problems driving into the power station and had trouble reaching the reactor buildings.
Cables to the reactors are too short. The plant is still without power. 8 kilometers from the Fukushima plant, Eriko Horiyuchi and her husband are getting anxious.
There were rumors about radiation leaking and that the power station was in trouble. From then on, I started to feel uneasy.
Local officials will not confirm the reports. Eriko's Swiss husband, Dominique, uncovers information through international news agencies.
I still had contact to the internet, and I started reading foreign papers, and they were a little bit more explicit about the disaster. Then my wife told me that somebody was whispering about a problem at the power plant, and then we decided to leave early in the morning.
The roads were cracked, so we didn't know how we could get out. We decided to wait until 5 a.m. to leave.
Navigating damaged roads in the dark would be too dangerous. Eriko and her family choose to wait until dawn. At the Fukushima plant, pressure inside reactor number 1 has now risen so high, the workers fear the reactor could explode. But they still haven't managed to locate key pressure release valves. Saturday, March the 12th. At their home, 8 kilometers from the Fukushima nuclear plant, Eriko and her husband evacuate.
We decided to get as far as possible from the power plant. We left at 5 a.m. and at 6 a.m. there was a general announcement ordering people to evacuate.
Just 1 hour after they leave, massive traffic jams block the roads. Tens of thousands of residents are heading for evacuation centers as fear of radiation spreads. Frustrated by poor communication with the power station, Prime Minister Khan decides to visit the plant in person.
We flew for miles and miles, and the scenery was the same as far as the eye could see. The land was covered with seawater. We couldn't tell where land ended and where the sea began.
Once at the plant, the Prime Minister demands a meeting with managers. He wants to know why reactor pressure release valves have not been opened.
They said the valves would be opened within 4 hours or so. Then the PM said to him, "You've been saying the same thing since yesterday, but it hasn't happened. Why is that?"
Finding the correct valves in the dark with soaring radiation levels is highly dangerous. One worker has already been taken to hospital, suffering from high exposure to radiation. And when they do find the valves, the loss of power makes them extremely hard to open. They are usually operated by heavy machinery running off mains power. The Fukushima 50 must try to do the job with car batteries and brute strength.
The valves were opened, and as a result, pressure inside the reactor decreased.
Plant managers now believe that reactor number 1 will be safe until they can connect mains power and begin cooling again. But radiation levels on the site are rising. Engineers hope it's because they've just released radioactive steam while opening the valves. But it may indicate that the 15-centimeter thick steel reactor is cracked, and that a core meltdown has caused fuel to escape from the reactor itself. The danger is far from over. 3:36 p.m. A massive aftershock rocks the plant.
The power station reported that they felt a huge tremor.
Almost immediately, the building which houses reactor number 1 explodes.
A cloud of white smoke was seen, and radiation levels increased dramatically.
Workers detect radiation levels 1,000 times higher than usual near reactor number 1. It could be another sign that the reactor itself is damaged and leaking. And other reactors are also showing signs of strain.
We realized there was damage to other reactor units. The first, second, and third units were all in serious conditions.
Two days later, an even larger explosion blows the building that houses reactor number 3 apart. The explosion is exactly what the Prime Minister feared.
I had a feeling of despair. The Prime Minister raised his voice at the experts and said, "You all assured me an explosion was not going to happen. Why did it happen?"
He fears a catastrophic dispersal of radiation, a fear shared by the rest of the world as they follow events live on television. Within hours, radiation levels at the plant begin to climb even higher. The Fukushima 50 still have no control over the reactors. Prime Minister Khan is forced to face some hard truths in a live television broadcast.
今後さらなる放射性物質の漏洩の危険が高まっております。
180,000 people are now forced to seek temporary shelter far from their homes, with no idea of when they may be allowed to return. Eriko is now 80 kilometers from the power plant. But such is her fear, she wants to get even further away.
We decided to go abroad, but there were no seats left on any flights. We thought we'd try and go as far as possible from Fukushima airport, but there were no flights available anywhere.
Eriko and her family are forced to stay where they are and take their chances with the radiation. And the very next day, another explosion causes a huge fire in reactor building 4.
After the first explosion, we tried our best to avoid the other two. But unfortunately, we could do nothing to stop them. That is a fact.
When the fire dies down, steam seen rising from building number 4 suggests spent fuel rods in open cooling pools may have overheated, leading to yet more radiation leakage. Or full catastrophe, meltdown. Plant managers need to flood the rods with water to cool them. Chinook helicopters are drafted in to dump water from the air. They use seawater, which will corrode machinery and disable the reactors forever. But high winds make it impossible to direct the water efficiently. And radiation levels above the site are so high, the efforts must be abandoned. Only the fire department is capable of flooding the fuel rods with enough water to make a difference. Ichiro Suzu is diverted from tsunami relief duties to lead an elite team of firefighters.
When I arrived in Fukushima, I felt that I wanted to live up to the expectations of the country. At the entrance, it was eerily silent. The inside of the Fukushima power plant really did resemble something from a monster movie.
Suzu and his team brave the dangers and spend days spraying water onto the spent fuel pools on site. He wears 2 radiation suits to protect him from fallout.
I was wearing these protective suits for 7 hours and it was excruciatingly hot. So hot that the sweat was dripping out of the filter in the breathing mask onto the ground. It was hell. I couldn't drink any water or go to the toilet. It was incredibly stressful.
While Ichiro Suzu and his team struggle to maintain control at Fukushima, the water they spray onto the plant is washing radiation into the ocean. And 230 kilometers away in Tokyo, reports begin to emerge that supplies of drinking water may be affected. The Prime Minister must now consider increasing the evacuation